Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called A Generous Offer, written by Credible333. The damage done by the First Interstellar War, known as humanity's Squaddy War to most sentients, or Conflict 81 to the Squaddi, was primarily, over 95%, due to humanity's unique ability. If this ability had been understood, the war may not have started, and the Durai would certainly not have switched sides to join the Squaddi. Xeno-behavioralists had observed the ability in Earth creatures, but had, falsely, assumed that sentients would be smart enough to abandon this deficiency. They explained that the fact that we hadn't, by theory, that all other sentients had been uplifted by the mysterious founders, and we clearly hadn't. They failed to understand. It's not a deficiency, it's math. We had, I admit, overextended ourselves in both military terms and morally when we tried to colonize LB-426. When the roaches, Squaddi, somewhat resembled Terran cockroaches, a small exoskeletal, direct respirational, despite having a name that sounds like a completely different invertebra. The Squaddi attacked the party responsible, lost power quickly. In fact, it was the fastest recall election in United Pacific history. The Squaddi mistook our reluctance to fight a war for territory that wasn't ours under interstellar agreements for weakness. They resound that since we didn't defend LB-426, we wouldn't defend less valuable areas within human borders. They simultaneously attacked Jerome, Polis Massa, and Luminova. Those belonged to 3 different human nations. Up, obviously, the new British Empire and the United States. They convinced other nations their colonies were next if something wasn't done. This was almost certainly not true. The Squaddi only took colonies that were more expensive to retake than they were worth. The Squaddi did the math, but not the type of math we're capable of. The Bush drive was the only military viable FTL drive at the time, and the speed and energy generation were inversely proportional to the square of the distance between a Batar generator. I think I pronounced that right. He didn't. Not even close. These were large installations that basically needed to be on an industrialized planet. Your ship speed was determined by the proportion of your ship dedicated to the collector, and the Batar score determined the power of the generator divided by distance in parsecs from the generator. It wasn't impossible to win a battle with a disadvantageous Batar score, but it required far more tonnage and it cost a lot more. I don't know why he explained basic push-drive physics in strategy. For the Squaddi, this meant it wouldn't happen. Let's be clear. We absolutely thought taking back these 3 systems were critical. For interspecies we knew, they believed the entire human race was politically unified. This is still not true, but aliens are reluctant to believe it. We have several wars with each other. All they'd take, but I digress. The point is, the roaches creatures seemed determined to attack all of humanity, and we assumed that they would keep taking stuff until we had nothing. One of the first moves we made was to guarantee the security of several Durai colonies, which seemed to be under threat, and which humanity was better positioned to defend than the Durai Confederacy. We did this because we knew they were likely going to be attacked. When we defend them, everyone seemed surprised, even though we had specifically said that we would defend these colonies. Most surprises were the roaches, who assumed we'd put up token resistance at best. They came in with max shielding, assuming that we'd also go max and gradually wear each, then run when each of the ship's shields dropped to critical. Instead, we went blaze. Full power to guns, some to engines, and almost no shields. I've seen the reports. It wasn't almost no shields. That plus concentrated fire crippled one of their Tier 3 warships before they deduced we were serious. One of the few Terran tech advantages was our ability to concentrate heavy fire on one ship without beams interfering with each other's accuracy. The commander adapted remarkably well to this information, changing to a cloud wheel formation to deal with the concentrated fire and the inevitable missiles. Eventually, they figured out that we were fighting this to the last ship. Again, to them, this was illogical, but they realized that even if they won, many of them would die. The most politically secure of the captains informed us he was retreating and would take no further part in the battle. He assumed that meant that he would not be targeted. The opposite was true. Every gun and a good quantity of missiles were aimed at the ship. The Fortune, actually, it was the Fortunate, a most inaptly named vessel, I believe. The rest of them were afraid to retreat. Seeing what happened, we had to transmit the obvious answer in clear. If you all retreat at the same time, we can only get one of you. You see, it was a risky fight. We could not have devoted enough T2s and 3s to overcome the slight petard factor advantage they had. We wanted a victory, but it didn't have to be crushing. We didn't even bother sending the ships in that mission force back for major repairs. Just patched them up as best we could in system. We did the math. If the roaches had done the maths, they would not have attacked every other Derai colony we protected, based on their understanding of the cost-benefit ratios. We repelled them 4 times, and the other time inflicted so much damage, they just left as soon as the reinforcements fleets arrived. With only 16 Tier 3s and 70 Tier 2s, we got our first Tier 5 ship and tons of supplies from the DC. Sure, it was obsolete. We also got the most lackadaisical ally we ever had. We'd assumed that they would be as committed as we were. A failure of the math, based on bad assumptions of universality. We fought harder than anyone expected, harder than made sense to those without math skills. But the Roaches made critical breakthroughs in weapons technology. They actually wanted to launch their war when it was developed, but the cautious Belai came a little early. Seeing the tide turn, the Derai deserted us and made peace. That was acceptable. We didn't expect them to fight on at a serious disadvantage. But then they made the critical mistake, the math error that cost them half their realm. They attacked us, stabbed us in the back. Between the two forces, we could not prevail, so we set up a peace conference. Even though the conference was with both powers, we insisted on detailing the settlement with each race in turn. We stressed that the offers they would get would be the most generous we will ever offer. Once they leave the table, the council had set in law that no settlement could be better than the offered that day. The Roaches got several significant systems, a general annual war damages payment of 20 years, and a compensation for losing POW labor, i.e. a ransom. The only thing we did get was they would pay for transporting back their POWs. Technically, they had agreed to not make a separate peace. But, like all agreements amongst non-humans, it would be honoured only while beneficial. For a refresher, here's the video of the offer to the Derai. You've talked for hours now, and there is no mention of what the Derai get. I insist I get a complete proposal in half an hour, or I'm leaving and the war continues. I can give you my offer now. Nothing. Not even the cost of repatriating your POWs, which I would like you, Lord Admiral, to pay personally. But as this joke, we are clearly winning. Do the maths. Your allies will betray you, as all non-humans seem to do to each other. Now, you may think that you will win against us, because you haven't done the math. You think that you have because you've trailed up men and materials, compensated for the doctrinal advantages, etc. You've come to the conclusion that humanity would need to spend over 15% its productive capability for at least 4 of your years. What if I told you that we were prepared to spend 30 of our production for 10 years? Lord Admiral was shocked at how accurate the human's knowledge of his government estimates were. He would spend. Don't be ridiculous. The resources we're fighting over don't justify anything like that. It would be a losing proposition. It's simple math. No, your math is simple and wrong. We don't know why, but every other sentient species in the galaxy evolved without an essential behavioral tool, a way of ensuring cooperation that every other species thought was a flaw in humanity. However, the mathematical theory called. I have no time for your games or theories. You're bluffing. I'm leaving. Absolutely nothing. Final offer. Going once. Going twice. The door slammed as the Roaches signed, and humanity was told of the result. Many sentients across the galaxy called it classic human insanity. As a result of our unevolved minds, only a few who had studied human culture recognized the offer. It was from old flat-screen media. Even fewer non-humans saw the significance, thinking it was an only negotiated Davis being dramatic and vain. But even the humans, who had never heard of the Godfather, understood the offer. What he was really offering was relief from the vengeance, and he was hoping the offer would be rejected. So humanity set itself overwhelmingly to a single task: make the Durai in general, and Lord Adma in particular, regret they ever met us. Defense budgets didn't get to 30%, they went to 40%. If you included the massive amounts of research into alternative propulsion and ways to more efficiently providing PATA fields, the expenditures exceeded the probable benefits of regaining systems from the Durai by an order of magnitude or more. Fleet after fleet engaged the Durai, who refused to believe that we would not soon fold. They dismissed the production estimates of their own intelligence services, concluding that was because they agreed almost exactly to our stated production. They must be exaggerated, but they weren't. A weapon they did not expect was the Longship Class Tier 4 vessel designed to fight in extremely low PATA ratings. Basically a receiver with a few weapons and shields attached, about halfway between Tier 2 and 3. It wasn't something that they had ever considered, such a large investment into a project such a small amount of power. Since they could be countered with comparatively cheap ships, they assumed that they were a mistake. In fact, they were a test bed and a way to force every system to have some cheap defenses. The total cost of countering them was significantly more than our own cost. But what they were really doing was mapping. Vacations, response times, sensor nets, because spending 10% of your economy trying to solve a problem tends to mean the problem gets solved. And no, humans had no idea they were going to make the breakthroughs they did, just that they'd make something that would win the war. The popular estimate was the breakthrough that would take 10 years. It took 8. A modification was made to the Pata generators to make them tightly directional, extending their range by about twice. Another was made to miniaturize the generator, allowing for a mothership to operate at full power independently and power a dozen Tier 3s and 4s. In terms of bang for buck, it was a miserable flotilla. In terms of how much damage it could do, deep in relatively undefended rear areas, it was a triumph. It must be stressed that only because we had the math did these things ever come into existence. They were researched by a dozen races before, but at any early stages ruled them out because, again, you can't do math. The end result was 2 wars happening at once, on the front line where we were losing slightly, with losses being sustainable but more than we'd liked, and raiding the rear areas, however devastating any area it touched. We had carefully cultivated the idea that no more than 3 longships would ever raid a system, so they were defenses, but nowhere near enough to face a mothership battle group. Repair facilities, strategic mines, food transport facilities had all burned. Sometimes the objective was a significant part of the warfighting system. Other times we just hit a system at random, destroyed the defenses and left. You see, the longships were still lurking, and any system left without defenses would eventually be sacked. About a year of this Durai sued for peace. We gave them terms we would accept, which were onerous to say the least, because we wanted them to pay for the war and the interest on the loans to pay for it. Give up all the disputed territories, release the POWs, and we consider releasing theirs at some point in the future, if we found like it. Oh, and Lord Adma's head. Rejection was as quick as it was unsurprisingly. Then we hit the fleets of other Durai borders. This was intended to give intelligence on Durai defenses to hostile powers and to give new crews practice against less experienced opponents. It turned out that the fleets had no maintenance for 3 months. There just wasn't parts for transportation for anything not facing a human threat. The message was sent: Fleet 5 has lost 100 ships. We are no longer capable of combat operations. At the meeting to discuss this, the commander of Fleet 4 and 8 both stated that their own fleets also lacked maintenance, and would bear the same against Terran force. Every single fleet was either vital where it was, lacked in basic equipment and supplies, or both. The defense chief claimed to have a solution that would enable a fleet to be sent to the border immediately. He then drew his traditional axe, cut off Lord Admir's head, and ordered the message: "Terms acceptable, delivery at point 4. By a diplomatic ship commencing." So, was it worth it? Thousands of lives lost, a decade of economic development consumed in the reputation of utter insanity. Yes, it was. Because every deal made with human nations is now guaranteed, not by paper, but by the knowledge of what we'll do. If humans get a guarantee, it's never ignored. If we get an agreement for something to not attack someone else, they're safe. Because they know we'll enforce it, even if that costs more than the fee. We have 15 Tier 3s guarding the border against you, for the Tang. 15. And 5 of them are off duty at any time. That's enough to stop the mighty reformist Navy from making a move. Because you agreed not to. And you know what happens to people who break our agreements with us. The math I was talking about is called game theory. And it confirms the validity of certain behaviors that evolved on Earth. Specifically the strategy called spite. You see, if you only punish some when it does not cost you, then they can break agreements any time. If, however, you value people treating you right higher than what you actually lose by treating you badly, then you can punish any time. You can raise the price of betrayal high enough so that it rarely or never happens. In the long run, being able to trust those you deal with, because they fear what you will do. Expensive actions to punish are cheap if it establishes that bad actions is not worth it. So, the news that your ships carry a new form of weapon, yes, I know about that, doesn't alarm me. I don't think you'll use this new advantage to betray us, because we carry something far more powerful. We carry a grudge. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.